"You may leave now." The Alpha King's voice cut through the great hall like a blade through silk, and every wolf in the room lowered their head in automatic submission. Every wolf except one. Alara stood frozen by the stone pillar near the servants' entrance, the empty wine pitcher clutched in her trembling hands, watching something impossible unfold before her eyes. King Theron had raised his hand, the universal gesture of absolute command, the signal that meant every lichen in proximity should bare their throat and wait for permission to breathe. But the warriors of Silverwood Pack, battle-hardened males who had never questioned an alpha's authority in their lives, were not looking at their king. They were looking at her, not with submission, not with obedience, with expectation, as if waiting for something only she could give. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs so violently she thought it might crack bone. This was not possible. She was nobody, the bastard daughter of a traitor. A servant who scrubbed floors and kept her eyes down and had survived 23 years by being invisible. She did not command warriors. She did not countermand kings. She did not even have a wolf. At least that is what she had always believed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alpha King Theron lowered his hand slowly, his jaw tightening with something that looked like confusion, before it transformed into cold calculation. His eyes, the color of storm clouds over winter mountains, fixed on Alara with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. He was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and a face that could have been carved by an artist who understood both cruelty and desire. He wore power like other men wore clothes, effortlessly and without apology. And right now, that power was focused entirely on the trembling servant girl who had somehow, impossibly, disrupted his command. "What is your name?" His question was quiet, but it carried through the hall with perfect clarity. Alara opened her mouth. No sound came out. Her throat had closed completely, seized by a terror so profound it felt like drowning on dry land. She had never spoken directly to an alpha before, let alone the Alpha King himself. Protocol demanded she kneel. Custom required she avert her eyes. Survival instinct screamed at her to run. But her body would not obey any of these impulses. She simply stood there, clutching her pitcher, while every powerful male in the room watched and waited. "I asked you a question." Theron took a step forward. Just one. But the movement rippled through the assembled wolves, like a stone thrown into still water. Several of the Silverwood warriors shifted their weight, and Alara realized with dawning horror that they were positioning themselves between her and their king, protecting her. From him. This was madness. This was suicide. This was going to get everyone killed. "Alara." The voice came from the high table, sharp with barely concealed fury. Lady Morgana rose from her seat beside the Alpha King's empty chair, her crimson gown flowing around her like spilled blood. She was everything Alara was not. Tall, voluptuous, with golden hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves, and green eyes that glittered with intelligence and malice in equal measure. She was the daughter of the Northern Territories Alpha, betrothed to King Theron. Since childhood, and she had made it abundantly clear during the 3 days of treaty negotiations that she considered servants less than human. Her name is Alara. She is one of our pack's servants. Clearly she has overstepped her bounds and created some confusion. I will see to her punishment personally. Morgana's smile was poison, wrapped in honey as she glided down from the dais. "You need not concern yourself with such trivial matters, my king. We have far more important discussions to continue regarding the territorial boundaries and the upcoming lunar ceremony." But Theron did not look at his betrothed, did not acknowledge her words. His gaze remained locked on Alara with a focus that felt almost physical, as though he could see through her skin to something beneath, something hidden. "Step forward, Alara." It was not a request. It was not quite a command either. It existed in some strange space between the two, and Alara found her feet moving before her mind caught up with the decision. She walked forward on legs that felt like water, past the tables laden with food that had gone cold during this bizarre standoff, past the warriors who tracked her movement with expressions she could not decipher. She stopped 3 paces from the Alpha King, close enough to smell the scent of pine and winter wind that clung to him, close enough to see the silver threading through the gray of his eyes. "Look at me." Alara's head lifted. She did not choose to obey. Her body simply responded, as though the request had bypassed her conscious mind entirely and spoken directly to something deeper, something that had been sleeping for so long she had forgotten it existed. And the moment her eyes met his, the world tilted sideways. Heat exploded through her chest, racing along every nerve ending until her skin felt too tight, too small to contain what was unfolding inside her. Theron's pupils dilated, black swallowing gray, and a low sound rumbled from his chest. Not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Something primal that made every instinct in Alara's body sit up and take notice. "Impossible," he breathed, and for the first time since entering Silverwood territory, the Alpha King looked genuinely shaken. "You do not have a wolf. I can sense it. But you have something else. Something older." His hand lifted, and Alara knew he was going to touch her face. Knew it with the same certainty she knew the sun would rise tomorrow. And she knew with equal certainty that if he touched her, everything would change in ways she could not begin to comprehend. Morgana must have sensed it too, because she moved with liquid grace, inserting herself between them with practiced ease. "My king, perhaps we should retire to more private quarters. The hour grows late, and you must be exhausted from your journey. This servant girl can wait until morning. I am certain Alpha Marcus will ensure she is properly disciplined for her disrespect." Her hand landed on Theron's arm, possessive and familiar, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. For a heartbeat, Alara thought the king might actually strike his betrothed. His jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath his beard-shadowed skin, and his eyes flashed with something that looked like barely restrained violence. But then his expression smoothed into the mask of cold indifference that Alara had watched him wear throughout the negotiations. The face of a ruler who had learned early that emotion was weakness. "You are correct, Lady Morgana. It has been a long day." He turned toward the high table, dismissing Alara as thoroughly as if she had ceased to exist. "Alpha Marcus, I trust you will investigate this peculiarity and provide me with a full report before the lunar ceremony tomorrow night. If there is some power at work in your territory that I should be aware of, I expect complete transparency." Alpha Marcus, a thick-set male with silver threading through his brown hair, bowed low. "Of course, Your Majesty. I assure you, this girl is nothing. A servant. She possesses no rank, no wolf, no power whatsoever. Whatever you sensed must have been a trick of the full moon's approach. Sometimes the veil between this world and the spirit realm grows thin during this phase." It was a reasonable explanation, a logical explanation, and it was also a lie. Alara could feel the truth of it in her bones, in the way her skin still hummed with residual energy, in the way the warriors continued to watch. Her with expressions that wavered between awe and apprehension. Something had happened in this hall. Something that the Alpha of Silverwood Pack desperately wanted to pretend had not occurred. The question was why. The assembled wolves began to disperse, conversations resuming in hushed tones as servants scurried to clear the tables and pack members filtered toward their quarters. Alara remained rooted to the spot, unable to process what had just transpired, until a hand clamped around her upper arm with bruising force. "Move." The command came from Beta Thomas, Alpha Marcus's second, a cruel-faced male who had made Alara's life particularly miserable over the years. He hauled her toward the servants' entrance, his fingers digging deep enough to leave marks, while other servants carefully avoided meeting her eyes. They knew what came next. Everyone knew what came next. You did not disrupt the Alpha King's authority and walk away unscathed. The corridors beneath the Great Hall were cold and damp, carved from stone during the Pack's founding over 3 centuries ago. Beta Thomas dragged Alara through the twisting passages without a word, taking her deeper into the earth than she had ever ventured before. They passed the kitchens, the storage rooms, the servants' quarters, and continued down, 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 until the air grew thick with moisture and the smell of mildew. He threw her into a cell that reeked of old blood and fear, and Alara stumbled, catching herself against the far wall before she could fall. The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through her chest. "You will stay here until Alpha Marcus decides what to do with you," Thomas said through the bars, his smile revealing too many teeth. "Though if I were you, I would pray he decides to kill you quickly. The king does not forget perceived insults, and neither does Lady Morgana. Whatever you are, whatever you did up there, you just signed your death warrant, girl. Should have stayed invisible." His footsteps faded away, leaving Alara alone in the darkness. She sank to the floor, her back against the damp stone, and finally allowed the trembling to overtake her completely. What had she done? She had not meant to do anything, had not chosen to stand there like an idiot, while the most powerful alpha in existence tried to command his warriors, had not decided to make those males look to her instead of him. She did not even understand how such a thing was possible. Alara had spent her entire life being powerless. Her mother had died giving birth to her, and her father, a beta who had challenged Alpha Marcus for leadership and lost, had been executed when Alara was only 5 years old. She had been allowed to live only because pack law forbade the killing of children, but she had been stripped of her father's name, her rank, her right to education or training. She had been made Omega, not in the sense of a pack role, but in the sense of having no role at all. No wolf had emerged during her first shift ceremony. No power had manifested during her adolescence. She was, as Alpha Marcus had so clearly stated, nothing. Except she was not nothing. Not anymore. Something had shifted inside her when the Alpha King's eyes met hers. Something vast and ancient and utterly terrifying had stirred from a sleep so deep it felt like death. And now she could feel it there, coiled in her chest, like a serpent made of moonlight, waiting, watching, learning. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The hours crawled by in that cell. Alara tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alpha King Theron staring at her with that mixture of shock and hunger that made her stomach twist with emotions she had no name for. She saw the warriors turning toward her, their wolves recognizing something their human minds could not comprehend. She saw Morgana's face, beautiful and cold as marble, calculating how best to eliminate a threat she did not yet understand. Footsteps in the corridor made Alara's head snap up. Too light to be Beta Thomas, too confident to be another servant. The figure that appeared beyond the bars was wrapped in a hooded cloak, but when she pushed back the hood, Alara recognized Isla, one of the pack's healers. She was ancient, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes milky with cataracts. But her hands were steady as she unlocked the cell door and slipped inside. "Quickly, child. We do not have much time." Isla's voice was barely a whisper. "The King's Beta is asking questions in the servants' quarters, and Alpha Marcus has called an emergency council meeting. They are deciding your fate as we speak, and the decision will not favor your survival." Alara pushed herself to her feet, her body aching from hours on the cold floor. "I do not understand what happened. I did not do anything. I just stood there." Isla's laugh was dry as autumn. "Leaves, You did everything, foolish girl. You called to their wolves without speaking a word. You exerted a power that has not been seen in this world for over 500 years. Do you know nothing of your own bloodline? My bloodline? Alara shook her head. My father was a beta. My mother was omega. There is nothing special about my blood except that it is considered tainted. Isla moved closer, her gnarled hands reaching up to frame Alara's face. Her touch was gentle, almost reverent, and her milky eyes seemed to see far more than sight should allow. Your father was a beta, yes, but your mother was no omega child. She was the last daughter of the Moon Whisper line, the last of the ancient females who could speak directly to the wolf spirits themselves. The alphas hunted them down centuries ago, terrified of females who could countermand their authority with nothing more than a thought. They nearly succeeded in wiping out the bloodline entirely. But a few survived, hiding their power, breeding with lesser wolves to dilute the gift until it became dormant. Your mother hoped it had skipped you entirely. She died praying you would live a quiet, invisible life. But the gift does not disappear, Alara. It only sleeps. And tonight, in the presence of the strongest alpha alive, your gift woke up. The words hit Alara like physical blows. She stepped back, pulling free of Isla's hands, shaking her head in denial. That is impossible. I would know. I would feel something. I have never had any power. I do not even have a wolf. Isla's smile was sad and knowing. You have a wolf, child. She has simply been waiting for you to be strong enough to survive her awakening. And she will come soon, whether you are ready or not. But first, you must leave this place. If you stay, Alpha Marcus will hand you over to the king or to Lady Morgana, and either option ends with your death. I have prepared supplies and a route through the old tunnels that will take you beyond the territory. Borders, you must go now, before the council meeting concludes. Alara wanted to refuse, wanted to explain that she had nowhere to go, no skills beyond serving wine and scrubbing floors, no way to survive alone in the wilderness that surrounded Silverwood territory. But the healer's expression left no room for argument. This was not a suggestion. This was survival. Why are you helping me? Alara asked as Isla pressed a small pack into her hands. You are risking your life for someone you barely... No. Isla's expression softened. I knew your mother, child. We trained together when we were young, before the purges, before the fear took hold. She saved my life once, at great cost to herself. I have waited 23 years for the chance to repay that debt. Now go. Follow the left tunnel at every fork. Do not stop until you reach the river. Cross it and keep moving north. There are still places in this world where the old ways are remembered, where your gift would be honored rather than feared. Find them. She pushed Alara toward a section of wall that had been invisible in the darkness. A narrow opening revealed a tunnel that smelled of earth and time. Alara looked back once, meeting Isla's eyes, trying to find words adequate for this moment. But before she could speak, footsteps thundered in the corridor above. Voices shouted. The council meeting had ended. Go! Isla hissed, and Alara went, plunging into the tunnel without looking back, her heart hammering in her mind, spinning with impossible truths. She was not nobody. She was not nothing. She was something the Alphas had spent 5 centuries trying to destroy, and the Alpha King had recognized it the moment he looked into her eyes. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting through the earth like the burrow of some massive creature. Ilara's hands scraped against rough stone as she felt her way forward in absolute darkness, her breathing loud and ragged in the confined space. Behind her, distant and echoing, she could hear sounds that might have been pursuit, or might have been her imagination transforming every drip of water into approaching footsteps. When she finally emerged, it was into a forest so dense the moonlight barely penetrated the canopy. Alara sucked in great gulps of fresh air, her legs trembling from exertion, her mind still reeling from Isla's revelations. The moon whisper line. Females who could speak to wolf spirits. A power that alphas feared enough to commit genocide. It sounded like a fairy tale, like something from the old stories that servants whispered to each other on long winter nights. Except it was not a story. It was her life, her blood, her impossible, terrifying destiny. Ilara shouldered the pack Isla had given her and started walking north. She had no idea where she was going, no plan beyond putting as much distance between herself and Silverwood territory as possible. The forest was alive with sounds. Owls hunting. Small creatures rustling through. Undergrowth. And somewhere, not far enough away, the howl of wolves who were not hunting for food. They were hunting for her. Ilara broke into a run. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. Ran until the forest gave way to rocky ground that climbed steadily upward. Ran until she heard the rush of water ahead and knew she had reached the river Isla mentioned. It was wider than she had expected, swollen with spring melt, moving fast enough to be dangerous. But dangerous. Water was less terrifying than what pursued her, so Ilara waded in without hesitation. The cold was shocking, stealing her breath and making her muscles seize. The current grabbed at her immediately, trying to sweep her downstream, and Ilara had to fight for every step forward. Halfway across, her foot slipped on a submerged rock, and she went under, water closing over her head, filling her nose and mouth. Panic seized her. She could not swim well, had never needed to learn. Servants did not have leisure time for such things. She was going to drown in this river, was going to die before she ever understood what she truly was. And then something inside her chest exploded outward with such force it felt like her ribs were cracking open. Light, silver, and pure as moonbeams erupted from her skin, turning the dark water around her luminescent. Ilara's back arched, and a scream tore from her throat, muffled by the river, as agony unlike anything she had ever experienced ripped through every nerve. This was not drowning. This was transformation. This was her wolf, finally, impossibly, catastrophically waking up. The pain was beyond description, beyond endurance. Bones shifted and reformed, muscles tore and reknit, skin split and healed in the span of heartbeats. And through it all, a voice in her head, ancient and amused and utterly certain. "About time you noticed me, little one. I have been waiting so very long to run." Ilara burst from the water on 4 legs instead of 2, her body no longer human, but something wild and powerful and right. Her wolf was not small or weak or invisible. She was massive, nearly as large as an alpha male, with fur the color of fresh snow touched with silver and eyes that glowed with their own internal light. She shook herself, spraying water in every direction, and lifted her nose to scent the wind. Everything was sharper now, clearer. The forest was alive with information her human senses had never been able to process. She could smell the wolves pursuing her, still a mile back but closing fast. Could hear their thoughts, not as words but as emotional impressions, aggression, determination, fear. They were afraid of her. Even now, even in her ignorance, they feared what she represented. "We need to move," her wolf said in her mind, and it was strange and wonderful and terrifying to have a voice there that was her, but not her. "They will not stop hunting until we are beyond their territory. And even then, the king will search for us. He recognized what we are. He will not forget." Ilara, still reeling from the shock of finally having a wolf after 23 years of emptiness, tried to formulate a response. But her wolf was already moving, powerful legs eating up the distance, carrying them deeper into the wilderness. They ran through the night, tireless and swift, putting miles between themselves and Silverwood territory. And as they ran, Ilara began to understand what Isla had tried to explain. She could feel other wolves in the surrounding forests. could sense their presence like pinpricks of light in her awareness. Some were from small packs. Some were lone wolves, driven out or traveling. And every single one of them could sense her in return, could feel the pull of her presence like gravity. It was intoxicating. It was terrifying. It was power unlike anything she had imagined. As dawn broke over the mountains, Alara's wolf finally slowed, finding a sheltered cave beneath an overhang of rock. The shift back to human form was easier than the first transformation, but still painful enough to leave Alara gasping and shaking on the cave floor. She dragged Isla's pack close and found clothes inside, along with dried meat, a water skin, and a small leather journal. Alara opened the journal with trembling hands and found her mother's handwriting filling the pages. A diary, instructions, a history that had been kept secret for 23 years. My dearest Alara, the first entry began. If you are reading this, then the gift has awakened in you, and you have learned the truth of what you are. I pray to the moon goddess that this day never comes. I pray that the moon whisper blood has diluted enough in your veins that you can live a normal, safe, invisible life. But if the gift has woken, then you must understand what it means, and why the alphas fear us so desperately. We are not superior to them. We are not meant to replace their authority. We are meant to balance it. The first, wolves were not ruled by strength alone. The strongest males led the hunts and defended the territory. Yes, but the females with the moon whisper gift ensured that strength did not become tyranny. We could speak to the wolf spirits, could calm rage, could break through bloodlust and battle frenzy. We could unite packs that would otherwise war eternally. We were peacemakers, healers, the voice of wisdom when violence threatened to destroy everything. But 500 years ago, during the Reformation, the Alpha Council decided that our gift was too dangerous. They claimed we undermined proper hierarchy. They declared us corrupted by dark magic. And they hunted us down systematically, pack by pack, until only a handful remained. Those few went into hiding, married into lesser bloodlines, allowed their power to go dormant. I am the last of the pure line, Alara, and you are now the last after me. What you do with this knowledge, how you choose to use this gift, that is not something I can decide for you. But know this, you are not cursed. You are not broken. You are the balance that the wolf world desperately needs but refuses to acknowledge. And there will be those who recognize this, who will try to use you, and those who will try to destroy you before you can become a threat to their power. Trust your instincts. Trust your wolf. And trust that the moon goddess does not create mistakes. You were meant to be exactly what you are. With all my love, your mother. Alara read the entry 3 times, tears streaming down her face, mourning the mother she barely remembered, and the life of normalcy that had never really been possible for her. Then she turned to the next entries, which detailed the moon whisper gift in practical terms. How to project calm into aggressive wolves. How to sense the health of wolf spirits separate from their human minds. How to call wolves to her without speaking. How to countermand alpha commands when those commands were driven by rage or darkness rather than wisdom. It was a manual for a power she did not yet know how to control. And according to her mother's notes, the learning process could take years. Years Alara might not have if the Alpha King decided she was too dangerous to live. She huddled in the cave, exhausted and overwhelmed, and tried to formulate a plan. She could keep running, could try to reach the northern territories her mother mentioned, where supposedly the old ways were still honored. Or she could try to learn to hide her gift, to suppress it the way her mother had, and hope that invisibility would keep her safe. Both options felt like defeat, like accepting that her mere existence was something shameful that needed to be hidden. But before Alara could decide on a course of action, her wolf's ears pricked forward. Someone was approaching the cave, someone moving with the confident stride of a predator who knew exactly where their prey was hiding. Alara scrambled for the back of the cave, her heart pounding, searching for another exit. There was none. She was trapped. The figure that appeared at the cave entrance was backlit by the rising sun, making it impossible to see features clearly. But Alara did not need to see. She could smell pine and winter wind, could feel the weight of that presence like a physical thing pressing against her awareness. Alpha King Theron had found her, and he was alone. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. He moved into the cave slowly, his hands visible and empty, his posture non-threatening despite the aura of power that rolled off him in waves. In the daylight, without the formal clothing and crown he had worn in the Great Hall, he looked somehow more dangerous. He wore simple traveling leathers, his dark hair tied back from his face, his gray eyes fixed on Alara with that same intensity that had unraveled her the night before. "I am not here to harm you." His voice was low, careful. The tone someone might use with a wild animal they did not want to spook. "I am not here on behalf of Alpha Marcus or the Silverwood Pack. I am here because I need to understand what you are. What I sensed in you last night." Alara pressed herself against the cave wall, very aware that she wore only the simple tunic and leggings from Isla's pack, that her hair was tangled and her feet were bare, and she looked exactly like what she was. A terrified girl with no training and no idea how to control the power suddenly burning inside her. "How did you find me?" The question came out steadier than she felt. Theron's lips quirked in something that was not quite a smile. "I am the Alpha King. Every wolf on this continent is connected to me through the ancient bonds, whether they acknowledge it or not. Once I identified your unique signature, following you was simply a matter of focus. You shine like a beacon to anyone with the ability to sense wolf spirits, which is why you cannot keep running. Others will find you, and not all of them will have benign intentions." He took another step forward and Alara fought the urge to shift. Her wolf wanted to emerge, wanted to face this threat on 4 legs where at least she would have teeth and speed. But instinct whispered that shifting now would be a mistake, that this confrontation needed to happen between humans, not beasts. "What do you want from me?" Alara lifted her chin, refusing to cower, even though every survival instinct screamed at her to submit to the dominant predator in front of her. "You are the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf alive. What could I possibly offer you?" Theron stopped 3 paces away, close enough that Alara could see the silver threading through his eyes, the way his jaw tightened with whatever he was not saying. "Information. Truth. Understanding. I have ruled for 15 years, Alara. I have united packs that had been at war for generations. I have brought stability and prosperity to territories that were drowning in chaos. And I have done it through strength, through establishing clear hierarchy, through ensuring that every wolf knows their place in the structure. But last night, you did something I have never seen. You countermanded my authority without speaking. You called to wolves who should have responded only to me. And instead of feeling rage at this challenge, I felt recognition, as though some part of me had been waiting my entire life to meet someone who could do exactly that." He paused, and something raw flickered across his features before he could mask it. "I need to know if you are a threat, or if you are something else entirely." The honesty in his voice caught Alara off guard. She had expected threats, demands, commands backed by overwhelming power. She had not expected vulnerability, however carefully controlled. "I do not know what I am," Alara admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Until last night, I thought I was nobody. Powerless. Less than Omega. Then you looked at me, and something inside me woke up. My wolf came during the river crossing. My mother left me a journal explaining that I am the last of some ancient bloodline that was nearly destroyed 5 centuries ago. I have no training, no control, no understanding of any of this. So if you came here looking for answers, I cannot give them to you." Theron was silent for a long moment, studying her with an intensity that made Alara's skin prickle with awareness. Then he did. Something completely unexpected. He lowered himself to sit on the cave floor, removing the height advantage, making himself marginally less threatening. The gesture was so at odds with everything she knew about alpha dominance that Alara could only stare. "Tell me about the journal," he said quietly. "Tell me what your mother wrote." And so Alara did. She sank down to sit as well, pulling her knees to her chest, and recounted the history of the Moon Whisper line, the females who could speak to wolf spirits, the balance they provided, the fear that led to their systematic elimination. She watched Theron's expression shift as she spoke, saw recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by something that looked almost like grief. "The peacemakers," he said when she finished. "We have stories about them in the old texts. I thought they were myths, cautionary tales about females who grew too powerful and had to be eliminated for the good of pack structure. But if what you are saying is true, if..." They were not power-hungry usurpers, but something else entirely. He stopped, shaking his head. "The Alpha Council rewrote our history. They told us that strength alone should rule, that hierarchy based on dominance was the only way to maintain order, and we believed them because we had no reason not to. But I have seen the cost of that belief. I have watched alphas descend into tyranny because there was no one to balance their power. I have executed males who could not control their bloodlust, because there was no one who could speak to their wolves and call them back from the edge of madness. If the peacemakers were real, if they were eliminated not because they were dangerous, but because they were a check on alpha authority, then everything I have built my rule upon is founded on a lie." The weight of that realization hung in the air between them. Alara could see Theron processing the implications, could sense his mind working through the political and personal ramifications. This was a male who had spent his entire life believing one thing, who had shaped himself into the perfect embodiment of alpha dominance, suddenly confronted with the possibility that dominance alone was not enough. "What do you intend to do with me?" Alara asked finally. "Now that you know what I am, now that you understand I am not a threat but the remnant of something your ancestors tried to destroy." Theron met her eyes, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "I intend to protect you. Because if you are truly the last Moon Whisper, then you are the most valuable wolf alive. Every alpha on this continent will want to either possess you or eliminate you once they learn what you represent. And they will learn. You cannot hide this gift, Alara. It radiates from you like heat from a fire. Already, wolves who passed within a mile of this cave will have felt your presence. Word will spread. Rumors will start. And within a week, every pack from here to the southern borders will be looking for the female who can countermand their authority." He stood, extending his hand to her in an offer rather than a command. "Come back with me. Not to Silverwood, to my territory, the Northern Crown lands. I can offer you protection, resources, training. I have texts in my library that date back to before the Reformation. Information about the Moon Whispers that survived the Purge. And I can ensure that no alpha touches you without going through me first." It was a generous offer. More than generous. It was also exactly what her mother had warned her about. There will be those who recognize this, who will try to use you. And what do you want in return? Alara ignored his outstretched hand, her voice hardening. "You do not offer protection and resources without expecting something back. That is not how alphas operate." A smile ghosted across Theron's lips, but it did not reach his eyes. "You are correct. I want access to your gift. I want to understand if the old texts are accurate, if Moon Whispers truly could calm bloodlust and unite warring packs. I want to know if you could help me achieve what I have been working toward for 15 years. True peace. Not peace maintained through fear and superior strength, but peace that lasts because wolves actually want to cooperate rather than simply being forced to comply." He lowered his hand, but did not step back. I want to know if you and I together could rewrite the future of our kind." The proposition was staggering. Alara could see the vision he was describing, could imagine what it might mean to bring back the balance that had been lost 5 centuries ago. But she could also see the danger. She would be placing herself entirely in the power of the strongest alpha alive, trusting that his intentions were as noble as his words. If she was wrong, if he decided she was too dangerous or too difficult to control, she would have no defense, no escape. And yet, what were her alternatives? Keep running until someone less scrupulous than the Alpha King found her? Try to hide until her power inevitably betrayed her location? Attempt to survive alone with no training and no understanding of what she had become? None of those options ended well. "If I agree to come with you," Alara said slowly, choosing each word with care, "I need certain guarantees. I am not agreeing to be owned, not agreeing to be used as a weapon or a tool. I need autonomy, freedom to leave if I choose, and I need your word that you will not hand me over to Lady Morgana or any other pack that demands my surrender." Theron's expression grew serious. "You have my word as Alpha King. You will have quarters in the Royal Wing, the same protection afforded to high-ranking pack members. You will have access to any resources you need for training, and you will be free to leave whenever you choose, though I will advise against it until you have better control of your gift." He paused. "As for Lady Morgana, that situation is complicated. Our betrothal is political, arranged when we were children to unite the northern and eastern territories. I do not love her, and she does not love me. But breaking that contract will create significant political upheaval. However, I will make it clear that you are under my personal protection, and that any attempt to harm you will be considered an act of war against the crown." It was not a perfect solution. Morgana had looked at Alara with such hatred in the Great Hall, such calculating malice. That woman would not simply accept Alara's presence in her future husband's territory. But it was better than nothing. And despite every rational reason to refuse, despite the voice in Alara's head that sounded suspiciously like her mother warning about alphas who would try to use her, something deeper responded to Theron's offer. Her wolf liked him, trusted him in some fundamental way that bypassed logic. And after 23 years of ignoring or suppressing her instincts, maybe it was time to start listening. "All right," Alara said finally. "I will come with you to the Northern Crown lands. But know this, Alpha King. If you betray my trust, if you try to cage me or control me or turn me into a weapon, I will find a way to leave. My mother spent her entire life hiding from alphas who wanted to use her. I would rather die free than live as someone's tool." Theron's smile was genuine this time, warm and approving. "I would expect nothing less from the last." Moon Whisper. He shrugged out of the traveling cloak he wore and offered it to her. "We have a long journey ahead. Are you strong enough to shift and run, or should we travel in human form?" Alara accepted the cloak, wrapping it around her shoulders. Her wolf was eager, practically vibrating with the desire to run beside this powerful male. But Alara's human mind was more cautious. "We will shift, but I need you to understand that I do not know how to control my gift yet. If something happens, if I accidentally do something that affects you or other wolves we encounter, I need you to be patient while I learn." Theron nodded. "Understood. And Alara, one more thing. When we reach the Northern Crown lands, there will be many who question your presence, who see you as a threat or a tool to be exploited. Trust very few. Keep your own counsel. And if you ever feel unsafe, come directly to me. I may be Alpha King, but even I have enemies within my own territory. Politics among wolves is a vicious game, and you have just become a very valuable piece on the board." With that ominous warning hanging in the air, he shifted. The transformation was liquid and effortless, nothing like Alara's painful awakening. One moment he was a man, the next he was the largest wolf Alara had ever seen. Black as midnight with those same stormy gray eyes, radiating power that made her wolf want to either submit or challenge him. Alara took a breath and reached for her wolf. The shift came easier this time, her body remembering the new configuration. And within seconds she stood on 4 legs, her white and silver fur almost luminous in the cave's dim light. Theron's wolf studied her for a long moment, his head tilting as though seeing something that surprised him. Then he turned and loped toward the cave entrance, pausing to look back and ensure she followed. And Alara did follow, into the unknown, into a future she could not predict, into a world where she was no longer invisible, no longer powerless, no longer nothing. She followed the Alpha King into whatever came next, her mother's words echoing in her mind. The moon goddess does not create mistakes. They ran for 3 days, stopping only briefly to rest and hunt. Theron set a grueling pace, clearly anxious to reach his territory before word of Alara's existence spread too widely. They passed through neutral zones, skirted the edges of smaller pack territories, and avoided any contact with other wolves. But Alara could feel them. Every pack they passed, she could sense the individual wolves like stars in her awareness. Some were content. Some were suffering under cruel alphas. Some were sick or injured, their wolf spirits crying out in pain. The awareness was overwhelming. Her mother's journal had mentioned that moon whispers could sense wolf spirits, but reading about it and experiencing it were vastly different things. By the second day, Alara had a splitting headache from the constant input, the endless stream of information her gift was trying to process. Theron noticed her faltering pace and slowed, shifting back to human form in a clearing beside a stream. Alara shifted as well, grateful for the respite, and collapsed onto the grass. "What is wrong?" Theron crouched beside her, concern evident in his expression. Alara pressed her palms to her temples. "There are too many wolves, too many voices. I can feel them all. Some are hurting and I want to help, but I do not know how. Some are angry, and it makes my skin crawl. Some are dying and it feels like I am dying with them. How am I supposed to function like this? How am I supposed to think with all of this noise in my head?" Theron was quiet for a moment, then moved to sit behind her. "May I?" He gestured toward her temples, and Alara nodded, too desperate for relief to question his intentions. His fingers settled against her temples, cool and steady, and he began to speak in a low, rhythmic tone. "Your gift is like a muscle that has never been used. Right now, you are trying to lift an impossible weight. You need to learn to filter, to focus. Close your eyes and focus on your breathing, just your breathing. Nothing else exists except the air moving in and out of your lungs. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on." Alara followed his instructions, drawing deep breaths, trying to push away the cacophony of wolf spirits clamoring for her attention. It was impossibly difficult, like trying to ignore an avalanche. But slowly, gradually, the noise began to recede. Not disappear, but become more manageable. Theron's voice continued, low and hypnotic. "Now, imagine a wall, strong and high. You control the gates in that wall. You decide what comes through and what stays out. The spirits will always be there. You will always be able to sense them. But you choose when to listen. You choose when to respond. The wall gives you protection, control. Build your wall." Alara. She visualized it. Stone and mortar, rising higher and higher in her mind's eye. With each breath, the wall became more solid, more real. And as it grew, the overwhelming input diminished to a distant hum. Still present, but no longer threatening to drown her. When Alara finally opened her eyes, the headache had reduced to a manageable ache. She turned to look at Theron, finding him closer than she expected, his hands still cradling her head, his expression intent. "How did you know to do that?" she asked. Theron's lips quirked. "I did not. Not exactly. But I know what it is like to be overwhelmed by too much input. When I first became Alpha King at 19, suddenly connected to every wolf in my territory, it nearly drove me mad. I had to learn to filter, to control what I allowed into my awareness. I assumed the principle would be similar for your gift. He lowered his hands slowly, creating distance between them, but his eyes remained locked on hers. You will get stronger, more practiced. Eventually, the filtering will become automatic. But until then, you need to be careful not to overtax yourself. Alara nodded, struck by the realization that this powerful male understood something of what she was experiencing, that he had offered help without demanding anything in return, that maybe, just maybe, his intentions were more honorable than her cynicism wanted to believe. "Thank you," she said softly. Theron's expression shifted, something warm and almost vulnerable, flickering across his features before he masked it. "We should keep moving. We are close to the border of the Northern Crown Lands. Once we cross, you will be under the full protection of my authority. But we still have several hours of travel ahead." They shifted again and continued running. As the sun began to set on the third day, they crested a ridge and Alara saw the Northern Crown Lands spread out before them. It was breathtaking. A vast valley surrounded by mountain peaks still capped, with snow, dotted with villages and farmland, with a river cutting through the center like a silver ribbon. And in the heart of the valley, rising from a rocky outcrop, stood a castle. Not the rough stone fortresses that most Pack Alphas inhabited, but an actual castle with soaring towers and graceful architecture that spoke of centuries of history and power. This was not just the home of an Alpha. This was the seat of a king. Theron shifted beside her, his human form silhouetted against the sunset. "Welcome to Ravencrest, capital of the Northern Crown Lands and seat of the Alpha King. Your new home, for as long as you choose to stay." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "I hope you do not come to regret this decision, Alara. Because once we cross that border, once my pack knows you are here, there will be no going back to anonymity. You will be thrust into a world of politics and power plays and ancient grudges, and you will need to learn very quickly how to navigate it. If you want to survive." Alara shifted to human form, standing beside him on the ridge, staring down at the valley that represented her future. Fear twisted in her gut. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. Determination. Curiosity. The faint, impossible hope that maybe she could become something more than the invisible girl who scrubbed floors. Maybe she could become the balance the wolf world desperately needed. "I am ready," she lied, because she was not ready at all. But she was. Here. And she was done running. Theron studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then let us go meet your future." They descended into the valley as the last light faded from the sky. As they approached the castle gates, wolves began to emerge from the shadows. Guards and sentries, drawn by the Alpha King's return, and curious about the unknown female at his side. Alara felt their attention like physical weight, felt their wolves reaching toward her instinctively, trying to understand what she was. She kept her mental walls high, controlling the urge to respond to their curiosity, focusing on simply walking forward with her head held high. The castle gates opened, revealing a courtyard filled with more wolves, servants and warriors, advisors and nobles, all stopping to stare as their king entered with a stranger. And standing at the top of the grand staircase, resplendent in a gown of deepest green, her golden hair piled in an elaborate style, was Lady Morgana. Her expression was cold, fury barely masked by a pleasant smile. "My king," she called down, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "How wonderful that you have returned. We have been quite concerned by your sudden departure. I trust your urgent business was resolved satisfactorily?" Her eyes raked over Alara with undisguised contempt. "And I see you have brought back a stray. How charitable." The insult hung in the air, Every wolf in the courtyard held their breath, waiting to see how their king would respond. Theron's hand settled on the small of Alara's back, a gesture of claim and protection that sent ripples of shock through the assembled wolves. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "This is Alara Moonwhisper, last of an ancient bloodline and a guest of the highest importance. She is under my personal protection and will be housed in the royal wing. Anyone who offers her disrespect will answer directly to me. Is that understood?" Morgana's pleasant mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the venom beneath. But she recovered quickly, descending the stairs with practiced grace. "Of course, my king. Forgive my jest. Any guest of yours is honored in your house. I simply did not realize we were expecting such distinguished company. Perhaps you might have sent word ahead so that proper accommodations could be prepared." The rebuke was subtle but clear. Theron had violated protocol by bringing Alara here without warning, without consulting his advisors or his betrothed. It was a breach of etiquette that gave Morgana ammunition for future political maneuvering. "The situation required discretion and speed," Theron replied coolly. "Prepare the moon suite for our guest. She will want to rest and refresh herself after our journey. And summon my senior advisors to the council chamber. We have much to discuss." He turned to Alara, his expression softening marginally. "Go with the head housekeeper. She will see to your needs. I must attend to some immediate matters, but I will send for you this evening so we can discuss your training schedule." It was a dismissal, but a gentle one. Alara nodded, suddenly feeling every mile they had traveled, every hour of fear and confusion, an overwhelming new sensation. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair stepped forward, bowing slightly. "This way, miss. Let us get you settled." Alara followed the housekeeper into the castle, very aware of the eyes tracking her movement, the whispers already starting to spread. The moon suite, when they reached it, was far grander than anything Alara had ever imagined she might inhabit. High ceilings, windows overlooking the valley, furniture that looked like it belonged in a palace rather than a bedroom, a massive bed with curtains of silver silk, and a bathroom with an actual sunken tub large enough to swim in. "There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit you, miss," the housekeeper said, moving about the room lighting candles. "I will have hot water brought up for a bath. Is there anything else you require?" Alara shook her head, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I do not need all of this. A simple room would be sufficient." The housekeeper smiled gently. "The Alpha King has decreed you are a guest of highest importance. This is the suite reserved for visiting royalty. It is his way of making a statement to the entire pack about your value and status. Refusing it would be seen as an insult. Politics. Everything here was politics. Every gesture and word carefully calculated. Alara was so far out of her depth, she might as well be drowning. After the housekeeper left, Alara sank into the massive bed and let herself feel the full weight of what she had agreed to. She was in the castle of the Alpha King, surrounded by wolves who saw her as either a threat or a tool, with a betrothed who already hated her, and a powerful male who wanted to use her gift to reshape their world. And she had absolutely no idea what she was doing. Her wolf stirred in her mind, amused rather than afraid. "We are exactly where we need to be, little one. Stop fighting what the moon goddess has clearly ordained. The Alpha King is not our enemy. He is something else, something important. You will see." But Alara was not sure she wanted to see, was not sure she was ready for whatever the moon goddess had planned. The bath helped. The hot water eased muscles sore from days of running, and the expensive soaps and oils made Alara feel almost human. Again. She dressed in one of the gowns from the wardrobe, a simple but elegant dress of deep blue that fit perfectly, and made her look like someone who belonged in a castle. Someone who was not a servant pretending to be important. A knock at the door made her tense. "Enter." A young male wolf stepped inside, bowing respectfully. He wore the insignia of the king's personal guard. "Miss Moonwhisper, the Alpha King requests your presence in his private study. I am to escort you there." Elara followed the guard through corridors that seemed to wind endlessly, past tapestries depicting historical battles and portraits of previous Alpha Kings. They climbed a tower staircase and stopped before a heavy wooden door carved with intricate wolf imagery. The guard knocked once, then opened the door and gestured for Elara to enter. Theron's private study was nothing like she expected. Where the rest of the castle was formal and imposing, this room was comfortable. Lived in. Books lined every wall, stacked on tables and piled on the floor. A fire crackled in the hearth, and Theron himself sat in a worn leather chair, still wearing his traveling clothes, looking more exhausted than Elara had yet seen him. He stood when she entered, gesturing to a chair across from his. "Sit, please. We have much to discuss and limited time before the council meeting." Elara sat, folding her hands in her lap to stop them from trembling. Theron poured 2 glasses of dark liquid from a crystal decanter and offered her one. "What is this?" she asked suspiciously. "Whiskey. Very old, very expensive, and absolutely necessary for what I am about to tell you." He drained his own glass in one swallow, then poured another. "I have just finished meeting with my head of intelligence. Word of your existence has already spread, faster than I anticipated. Within a week, every major alpha on the continent will know that a Moonwhisper has awakened, and they will all want you." Elara's stomach dropped. "Want me how?" Theron's expression was grim. "Some will want to study you, to understand your gift and potentially replicate it. Some will want to bind you through mate bonds or political alliances, ensuring your loyalty to their pack. Some will want to eliminate you before you can become a threat to their authority. And some," he paused, his jaw tightening, "will want to breed you, hoping to produce offspring who carry the Moonwhisper gift. You have become the most valuable commodity in the wolf world overnight, Elara, and that makes you the most endangered." The bluntness of his words was like a slap. Elara took a drink of the whiskey, choking on the burn, her mind reeling. She had known she would face danger, but hearing it laid out so starkly made it real in a way that was terrifying. "What do you suggest I do?" she managed. Theron leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gray eyes intense. "You learn. Fast. You master your gift until you can defend yourself, until you can calm an alpha in bloodlust, or break through a command that would force you to submit, until you are so powerful that harming you becomes too costly for anyone to attempt." He reached out, his hand covering hers where it gripped the glass. "And you let me help you. Because despite what you think, despite what your mother warned you about alphas who would use you, I do not want to cage you, Elara. I want to see what you become when you are finally free to be what you were always meant to be." His touch was warm, grounding, and something in Elara's chest pulled tight, recognizing something in him that her conscious mind was not ready to acknowledge. She pulled her hand away gently, creating distance. "You said you have texts about the Moonwhispers. Can I see them?" Theron stood, moving to one of the bookshelves and pulling out several leather-bound volumes so old they looked like they might crumble to dust. He set them on the table between them carefully. "These date back to before the Reformation, histories written by wolves who actually knew Moonwhispers, training manuals, philosophical texts about the balance between strength and wisdom. Everything I could preserve when I realized the official histories had been deliberately altered." He opened one, revealing pages covered in elegant script. This one describes the bonding ceremony between an Alpha King and his Moonwhisper, how they would link their powers together, creating something stronger than either could achieve. Alone, the king provided protection and enforced order. The Moonwhisper provided wisdom and maintained spiritual health of the pack. Together, they were meant to be the perfect leadership structure. Elara studied the text, her heart pounding. This reads like a marriage ceremony. Theron's expression was carefully neutral. In many ways it was, though not always romantic. Sometimes it was purely political. A partnership based on mutual need and complementary skills. He closed the book. I am not suggesting we perform such a ceremony. I am simply showing you what the relationship between our kinds once was, what it could be again. But there was something in his eyes, some carefully controlled longing, that suggested he was thinking about more than just political partnership. And Alara felt her wolf respond to that unspoken desire with interest rather than alarm. I need time, she said, standing abruptly. Time to read these texts. Time to train. Time to understand what I have. Become before I start making decisions about linking my power to anyone, even you. Theron nodded, accepting her retreat. Of course. Take the books with you. Study them. And tomorrow, we will begin your training in earnest. I have asked Elena, my head of spiritual counsel, to work with you. She is old enough to remember stories her grandmother told about the moon whispers. If anyone can guide you, it is her. Alara gathered the books, clutching them to her chest like armor. But before she could, leave. Theron spoke again. Alara, one more thing. The lunar ceremony is in 3 days. It is the most sacred ritual of our kind, when all wolves in a territory gather to honor the moon goddess and renew their bonds to each other and their alpha. Your presence at that ceremony will be a statement, a declaration that you are part of this pack, under my protection, and that anyone who wishes to harm you will have to go through me, and every wolf loyal to me. He stood, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. I cannot force you to attend, but I am asking you to trust me, to stand at my side during the ceremony and let the entire wolf world see that the moon whispers have returned, that the age of balance has begun again. It was not just an invitation. It was a challenge, a test of whether Alara was brave enough to step fully into this new identity rather than hiding in the shadows. 3 days. She had 3 days to prepare for a moment that would define the rest of her life. I will think about it, she managed, then fled before he could see how badly she was shaking. Back in the moon suite, Alara spread the ancient texts across the bed and began to read. The histories painted a picture of a world vastly different from the one she had grown up in. A world where females with the moon whisper gift were revered, where their counsel was sought on matters of war and peace, where they stood as equals beside the strongest alphas rather than being relegated to submission and silence. But they also told stories of moon whispers who were corrupted by power, who used their gifts for personal gain rather than the good of the pack. Stories of partnerships between alpha kings and moon whispers that descended into obsession and destruction. The gift was not inherently good or evil. It was a tool. And like any tool, everything depended on who wielded it and to what purpose. As dawn broke over the valley, Alara finally fell into exhausted sleep, her dreams filled with images of silver wolves and ancient ceremonies and gray eyes that saw too much. She woke to someone pounding on her door with alarming urgency. Alara stumbled out of bed, pulling on a robe, and opened the door to find the young guard from the previous evening looking pale and frightened. Miss Moonwhisper, you need to come with me immediately. There has been an incident in the village. Wolves are going feral. The Alpha King is trying to contain them, but they are not responding to his commands. He sent me to fetch you. He believes you might be able to help. Alara's heart lurched. This was it, the first real test of whether her gift was truly what the old text claimed. Take me to them. She did not bother changing clothes, simply followed the guard out of the castle at a run. They raced through the dawn-quiet streets until they reached the village square where a scene of chaos unfolded. 5 wolves, all in their animal forms, were tearing apart market stalls and attacking anything that moved. Their eyes glowed red rather than natural colors, and foam dripped from their jaws. Feral. completely lost to their animal nature with no humanity left to control the beast. Theron was there in his human form, blood streaming from a gash on his arm, trying to contain the wolves with sheer alpha command. But they were not responding, were not even acknowledging his authority. A dozen other wolves surrounded the ferals, trying to drive them away from the civilians without killing them. But it was a losing battle. Ilara did not think, did not plan. She simply let her walls drop and reached out with her gift, searching for the wolf spirits buried beneath the feral madness. What she found made her gasp. These wolves were not evil. They were sick. Their spirits were being consumed by some kind of spiritual infection, a darkness that was eating them from the inside out. And without intervention, they would die as they tore apart everything around them. Ilara stepped forward, ignoring Theron's shout of warning, and focused every bit of her gift on the closest feral wolf. She could not command it the way an alpha would. That was not how Moon Whisper power worked. Instead, she spoke directly to its wolf spirit, bypassing the corrupted mind entirely. I see you. I hear you. You are not lost. You are not beyond saving. Come back. Come home. The words were not spoken aloud. They resonated on some deeper level, carried on the same frequency that wolf spirits used to communicate with each other. The feral wolf stopped. Just stopped, mid-lunge, its red eyes flickering to confusion. Ilara pushed harder, reaching deeper, finding the core of what this wolf had been before the sickness took hold. A mother, a protector, a wolf who had loved her pack and served with honor until something dark invaded her spirit. You are stronger than this darkness. Remember who you are. Remember your pack. Remember yourself. Slowly, impossibly, the red began to fade from the wolf's eyes. Foam stopped dripping, and then the feral snarls quieted to confused whimpers. And then the wolf collapsed, shifting involuntarily back to human form. A woman in her 30s, unconscious but breathing steadily. Normal, healed. Ilara did not pause to celebrate. She moved to the next feral wolf, and the next, speaking to each wolf spirit in turn, calling them back from the madness, anchoring them to their humanity. It was exhausting, like trying to hold back a flood with nothing but her bare hands. But she kept going, kept pushing, until all 5 wolves lay unconscious in their human forms, no longer a danger to themselves or others. And then Ilara's legs gave out. She collapsed, only to be caught by strong arms before she hit the ground. Theron held her against his chest, his heart pounding beneath her ear, his voice rough with something that sounded like fear. What were you thinking? You could have been killed. You have no training, no experience with feral wolves, and you just walked into the middle of a pack of them. Ilara tilted her head back to meet his eyes, managing a weak smile despite her exhaustion. You asked me to attend the lunar ceremony, to stand beside you and show the wolf world that Moon Whispers have returned. I figured I should probably demonstrate that I am worth the political upheaval my presence is going to cause. Theron stared at her for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle or a restrained smile, but a genuine, full-bodied laugh that transformed his entire face. You are either the bravest or most foolish wolf I have ever met. Possibly both. He lifted her easily, cradling her like she weighed nothing. But you just saved 5 lives that were already lost. You did in minutes what I could not do with all my alpha authority. And you proved beyond any doubt that the Moon Whisper gift is real and desperately needed. He carried her back toward the castle, and Ilara was too tired to protest. Around them, wolves were emerging from their homes, drawn by the commotion. They stared at Ilara with expressions ranging from awe to fear to desperate hope. Word would spread. By nightfall, every wolf in the northern Crownlands would know what she had done. There would be no more hiding, no more anonymity. She had just announced to the world exactly how powerful a moon whisper could be. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? But as Theron carried her through the castle gates, and she saw Morgana watching from a window with an expression of pure hatred, Ilara realized the true cost of what she had just done. She had not just saved 5 wolves. She had declared war. Because every alpha who wanted to control her now knew exactly what she could do. And every alpha who feared her now knew she was powerful enough to be worth destroying. The game had begun, and Ilara had no idea if she was strong enough to win.